And hey there, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me on this Tuesday. I'm Sam Beiler. I'm your host for this webinar. I am the CEO and co-founder of Boostpoint, and I'm excited today to chat about generative AI and how it's transforming recruitment marketing. So thanks so much for joining me. Hope everyone's having a great October so far. Boostpoint, we're located on the east side of Pennsylvania in Lancaster, PA, just outside of Philadelphia. Go Eagles, Game 7 tonight, pre-World Series. We'll see if we can get there. So let's jump right into today's topic. And before we do that, I'm going to a lot of times, you do jump on webinars and there's something at the end and it's like this retention thing. I'm going to go ahead and put that right here in the beginning. One of the things that we're in the middle of right now at Boostpoint is the beta release of our generative AI tool. And we'll get to this a little bit later. But right now, during beta, it's completely free. So there's limited access, but you can get access by the link that I'm going to share right now through the chat. Think of this as how some of our users describe it as chat GPT on recruitment steroids. So I just threw a link in the chat. If you want to sign up for that, again, it's completely free while it's in beta, and that's a limited time. But we'll get to a little bit more of that later. I want to jump right now into our topic for today's webinar, which is around recruitment marketing, generative AI. Why is this important? AI, I was just at HR Tech. What was that, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half maybe. AI was a huge part of the conversation. Seems like every conference you go to right now in HR and talent acquisition, AI is like a big part of it. One of the things that I'm noticing though is like where's the real value? Like there's a lot of like concepts of ways that you could use AI. But really, when it comes down to your day-to-day, say you're a recruiter or in a manager role for a TA team, like what are ways you can practically use generative AI in your everyday that can help you? So I'm excited to get into some of those things here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me 1 second and have a couple slides I want to go through of like, all right, let's talk about why this is important, first of all, because AI in itself isn't just valuable. Like you need to put it to good use. And all right, here we go. Sharing my screen. All right. So want to state something here that we've been looking into a lot. And some obvious things as I talk to TA teams, like job boards, they really suck, especially for hiring certain positions. Certain like high volume as a whole, even other types of hiring. Job boards is just becoming increasingly ineffective. If you rewind like the past 10 years, it's just becoming overly saturated. There's 3 core problems that we see. Some of the pitfalls of traditional job boards for filling your talent pipeline. Number 1 is there's just an oversaturation of unqualified candidates. A study showed that it takes 1 to 200 applications for one role to be filled for most job boards. So again, there's just this huge pool of candidates that you open it up, that you get flooded with, that are often not very qualified. One of the core reasons is companies like Indeed, they make more money when more people apply to these positions through their advertising platform. And that's one of the most common frustrations that I hear from TA teams is there's just a huge oversaturation of unqualified candidates. Second, and this is to me is one of the most important, is you're missing the best candidates. Research shows that 73% of all candidates in the candidate pool are passive job seekers, which means they're not actively looking for new jobs on places like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and these job boards. So the big question then is like, how do we get in front of this pool of passive job seekers? And that's really where recruitment marketing comes into play. And we'll get into that a little bit later. And then number 3 is job boards are really expensive. Like they've increased their prices. Some platforms have increased them by 300% since 2020. but job ad performance has actually decreased. So with this kind of being the scenario, I know a lot of TA teams, this is the primary source of candidate flow, but you kind of see this decrease in performance. So what's the answer? How do we supplement our candidate flow and get in front of the right job seekers? This is where recruitment marketing really comes into play, because to attract passive job seekers to your organization, you really need to get in front of them before they're searching for a new job. And this is where the concept of recruitment marketing comes into play and building your employer brand. It's how do we position our brand to get in front of these candidates before they're searching for a new job. So that's where recruitment marketing comes into play. More specifically, what I want to talk about here is social media. We've done a lot of different A/B testing as far as all right, what platforms are most effective, more effective than others, and where should you invest most of your time when you think of recruitment marketing from a platform perspective. And we've seen social media be the answer to that question. Specifically, platforms like Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok, LinkedIn, if it's more for a skilled position. And really, you want to look at specific social media platforms based on the positions that you're hiring. Here's a little bit of data specifically on Facebook and Instagram. And this is why these platforms perform better than a lot of other advertising channels, maybe like traditional media or display advertising. And the big reason is this is where the audience lives. This is where people spend a lot of their time on their mobile device. If we're honest, this is where the mobile device is where attention is right now. It's evolved from the desktop, your computer, TV. Right now, mobile devices, this is where people really live, and where they spend most of their time on these mobile devices is social media, because 81% of the North American population has an active Facebook account. Users that have both Facebook and Instagram, they're spending an average of 3 hours per day on these platforms. And then tie this into recruitment marketing is 67, this is from a study from 2021, 67% of job applications were actually filled out on a mobile device. And that number only continues to grow. So with that said, we know that, okay, we're trying to get in front of passive candidates, increase the diversity of the type of candidates that are coming into our pipeline. We know that social media is a very viable source to do that. The next big problem is, and this is what I hear from TA teams when we're talking about recruitment marketing, is the how. How do we implement this? Maybe if we don't have the biggest budget for this, or we don't have the team for this. How do we go from realizing, hey, we need to do this, to how do we implement this? Because then one of the very practical questions is well, we don't know, or statements is we don't know what to say. I hear that from TA teams fairly often, is this is the barrier from being more active on these social media platforms is, we don't know what to say. Our recruiters, our hiring managers, they don't have time to build social media content, to produce that, build it, and distribute it. And so that's really a big limiting perspective, a limiting factor when we're looking at, all right, how do we actually implement this? And so this is where generative AI comes into play and can be a great solution for this. So with generative AI, you go to this next slide here, talk a bit about this candidate experience that we're trying to build and how do we attract candidates towards talent pipeline, and how it starts with generative AI. So I'm going to talk through, first of all, the candidate experience that we're trying to build here and kind of go through this slide right here. And then what's the type of technology that we can leverage to do this? So it all starts with the right content. Social media platforms, they're a lot different than job board content. email copy. It really needs to be candidate centric type of copy versus company centric. And so just like copying and pasting a boring job description into a social media ad isn't going to perform the best. So the right headlines, the right ad copy makes a big difference here as far as how well your content is going to perform, which inherently is connected to how many people see the things that you're distributing. So generative AI, this is where Gen AI comes into place. With this technology, you can automatically create this content that is very recruitment specific. We built a tool. This is our generative AI tool that I put a link in the chat prior, and we'll jump into that. I'll show you kind of how to create some of these things. But the basic description of it is you can take very bland job descriptions, put them into this tool, and then produce things like LinkedIn posts, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, and instantly have a very seasoned, recruitment marketer, copywriter, as your assistant. And all you need to feed it is, descriptions of your jobs and very simple information. So that's the start of it, is creating this content. And then from there is actually distributing the content beyond that. So the candidate experience, really what you're trying to create is from the step one here is building the content. Step two is distributing the content, whether that's through a targeted Facebook ad, posting to your personal LinkedIn profile, posting in Instagram Reels or TikTok. That's then your distribution method of looking at these different platforms and how you get your content on those platforms. The way I like to think through channels is really look at where is your ideal employee, what platforms are they living on. That's really how you need to think through your channel strategy. LinkedIn, for example, is where you'll find your more skilled positions. Anything in tech. You'll be more successful hiring developers, sales professionals, and more skilled roles on LinkedIn versus TikTok, where we see platforms like TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram really come alive is for hourly positions and high volume hiring scenarios. All right, so gonna pause here for a sec and switch gears a little bit and jump into, all right, generative AI, what are some practical examples and how we can use this? Also, as I'm going through this, there is a Q&A section. I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but feel free to jump in and post any questions in the Q&A section, and we'll be sure to get to the questions we have time for here at towards the tail end of this webinar. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again here and pull up. Boostpoint Create is the generative AI tool that we initially released in alpha late summer, and a couple of weeks ago released the beta version of this. And again, like I described before, people often describe this as like ChatGPT on recruitment steroids. So I'm going to give a couple practical examples of how you can use this tool to create very engaging recruitment advertising, recruitment marketing content. So it all starts, I'm going to start with a project title. The way you want to think through this is this for like specific to an open role that I'm advertising for, or am I building more generic like employer brand content, for my content calendar on Facebook or LinkedIn? For this specific example, I'm going to create content for a specific position. Let's say we're looking for a new CTO. Don't tell Jared, my current CTO and co-founder. But just for this example, Boostpoint, I'm looking for a new CTO. So I'm going to build the project through that lens. I'm going to look for specific actions that I want to create for this specific project. We've trained a large language model that we call Carl, specific to recruitment marketing language. So you can be confident that, hey, like this type of content is going to be recruitment marketing specific. So I'm going to tell Carl to build me a Facebook post, a LinkedIn post. Maybe we'll throw TikTok in there. We're going to do a job description if I need to refresh my job descriptions. Email cold outreach if I'm doing some sourcing here. Interview questions. I'm not a very technical person. I'm a CEO with sales and marketing background, but I need to interview someone with technical experience like a CTO. So some fresh interview questions are going to be helpful here. And I'm going to add those to my project and then hit continue. Here's where I'm going to select a few other things. The thing about this is where you're giving Carl instruction on how to create this content. So I'm going to start with tone. We'll do like a warm tone. This is the company here at Boostpoint. Audience, you can use this. You can either leave this blank if you want to create a little more generic content. If you want it to be more specific to a certain like audience, you can fill in the audience with those type of things. Like say wouldn't be attracting this for CTO position, but can't think of another example, but like say I'm hiring interns, I could put college student in the audience, and it would write the content a little bit more tailored to that type of individual, which would be helpful for emails or content that I'm writing for social media. You could also say I'd want this in a different language. I could say, hey, Spanish speaking people, and it would write the output in Spanish, and you can do that with multiple languages. For this specific example, like say I'm doing some targeted sourcing, so I'm looking at technical folks here in my area, and I'm going to hire Jared Neff to replace my CTO, Jared Neff, for this example here, and found him on LinkedIn. I'm going to bring over a lot of the content on his LinkedIn profile and just copy and paste that into the audience section. And you'll see the result of this in a little later, in about a minute or two. But what Carl will do, it'll look at the job description that I put in, and then also look at his LinkedIn profile, the content on his LinkedIn profile, and it will create very specific like email copy that I could send to Jared to prospect him. Below that, now we're going to put in some information about the job specifically. So the job title, a CTO, job description, I can stay very generic, or I could get very specific in this. Basically, the more direction you give it on the job description, it'll just be a little bit closer to probably what you need at the end. So if I'd have like specific requirements, that, hey, I know my CTO needs to have, these 10 things, I could just throw those in there, and then it'll create the rest. For this, I'm just going to keep it very generic, and it'll give me a great start for a job description. Below that, now I can select, again, think of the actions that I selected before the 6. I can select things like how many posts do I want? Do I want multiple posts of this? Give me different variations. And I can also give Carl specific direction for each action. So if, say for the Facebook post, I more want to highlight our company culture, in our Facebook post, and our LinkedIn post, maybe I want to highlight our core values in that specific post. And so I can give Carl specific direction and things to include if I want to. I can also leave that blank, and then he can create it from scratch as well. So there's those things. The email cold outreach, how many emails do I want? We'll do 2 emails. Interview questions, we'll select 10 of those. And now we're ready to hit create. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Close. Now it'll take a minute or two for this to populate. I built a project here, so we don't have to wait on this a little bit before. Again, that'll take like a minute or so for that to populate, but we're just going to jump right into a previous project that I created. First thing we're going to look at is the job description, and look through this a little bit. One thing you'll notice, and because we spent a lot of time on the training of our large language model, is how candidate-centric all the content is. So with, again, recruitment marketing, talent acquisition, really we need to come from the perspective of we're trying to sell these jobs, basically. So it's not as much, hey, here's all the requirements, or you need to do this, 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 and this. Is more candidate centric, as in like, what do they get out of this position? So you'll notice, even in the job descriptions, we're putting the candidate's needs and wants first in all the copy. And then, yes, it's important to talk about the benefits, the responsibilities, and the requirements, but that's not the first thing, we talk about in something like a job description or a social media post. Now, let's say, this is 85% of the way there, but, something's just not quite right, or it's the wrong title. I could give Carl specific direction to rewrite this. So again, the way you want to think about this is, if I'd have a content writer that, is sitting right next to me that wrote this, and I'm like, hey, can you tweak this or that? That same type of feedback you can give to Carl, and he'll take that and rewrite it with your instructions. So that's an example of a job description. We'll go through a couple more of these, like a Facebook post. Again, what you'll notice here is, because it's a Facebook post, it'll be content that's more relevant to that channel. So it's not just a generic social media post. This is more so in the format of, hey, like the copy that would perform well on Facebook, and that's going to be different than the type of copy that will perform super well on LinkedIn. So there's an example of that. Here's where this is tying back to the audience section prior. This is really, really mind-blowing type of things here. Like some of the first times I used this, even for our own efforts, I was like, this is just spot on. Because what this here is, it's a cold email outreach. Say I'd be sourcing Jared, found him on LinkedIn, don't really know him, but I want to capture his attention. And what this email here is, if I read through this and then read through his LinkedIn profile, what it's doing is pulling things that are super relevant to his past experience, to the job that I'm trying to attract him into. And so we've had users leverage this kind of in their day-to-day sourcing efforts, and they've seen a 50% increase in their email engagement, because they're not leveraging templates and like generic copy, but they're leveraging very specific, like this email will only work for Jared. So it's super personalized in that way. And again, you can use the rewrite tool here, like say, maybe this isn't quite how I'd, how I'd write an email. Maybe I could say, hey, make it more friendly. And then I can rewrite. Again, it'll take 30 seconds or a minute, and I'll rewrite that and with my instructions there. So that's it. Say, now I need to bring this into, how do I send this email now? So Boostpoint Create is not like an email tool or a social media platform. Basically, you will copy with this button right here and then paste it in your email provider. And then last thing I'm going to share here before I do Q&A, I see a bunch of questions there in Q&A, so I'm going to jump to those in about a minute here, is interview questions. This is, again, I just talked with a group of users earlier this week that this is the primary way they're using Boostpoint here, is because they source in a lot of very technical roles that they don't have a ton of knowledge in. And instead of spending 30 minutes researching Google, they get a really head start with great interview questions right here with Boostpoint. So that's kind of the quick examples there. Hopefully you get some really practical ways of how you can use generative AI in your day-to-day recruitment processes. Again, if this is something you're interested in using like today, the link in the chat, you can create a free account right now. It takes literally about 10 seconds to sign up for. Feel free to click on that link and sign up, and feel free to use it as much as you want, and hopefully it's super helpful for you. We are going to now transition into Q&A, which is the most exciting part of these webinars for me personally. All right, so let's jump into some of these questions right now. And all right, got a couple questions here. Pull these up now. What is this is a great question. What's the difference between Boostpoint, your tool, and Chat GPT? So this is a great question. Like we talked to a lot of TA teams that maybe have dabbled with Chat GPT before. And the big difference here is the training model of the large language model. So with ChatGPT, you're just starting with a very vanilla model that's not very specific to recruitment at all. What we've done and what the result then is, you can get a job description in seconds, but it's very vanilla. And it's not very unique to what's actually going to perform very well. So the biggest difference is the actual quality of the output. And then secondarily is the efficiency of use. So with ChatGPT, maybe you need to store your prompts somewhere, copy and paste, and give it, a little more direction, and be tweaking your prompts. Like, it's very prompt driven, and that can be very time consuming. If you don't have a ton of experience with ChatGPT. So those are the two differences: people that use our tool versus ChatGPT and what they find. Going to jump to another question here. Second. So the product's in beta right now. What are your plans for the product after beta? So our plan for the product right now, it's free while it's in beta. That will be through the remainder of this year. It's going to be in full release sometime in January. At that point, it's going to have a price tag attached to it. We're still doing discovery there of what makes most sense. But from now through the end of the year, it's going to be free in beta. Some of the next features, though, I'm excited to, we're working on the product roadmap and expanding that out. Some of the next big things are going to be like possible integrations with platforms. Like, all right, how do you get this content from Boostpoint into other platforms? And the answer to that would be integrations. So those are some things we're working on in the future, as well as other actions that we're always, adding here and there. All right, right now it's a list of, about 15 actions, but there's other things within recruitment teams, recruitment processes that we're analyzing right now as we talk with our core beta group that we'll potentially add as well. And I'm going to do one more question I have here before we wrap this up. Sorry, let me go back to that a little bit. There is while the product is in beta, there's a chat widget within the product, and leveraging that, if again, it's in beta, maybe you might have some errors here or there. You can leverage that to submit something to our product team, and that'll take a look at any issues you might be having and resolve things in that way. All right, so one last question, and before we wrap this up, what about regulations and DEI issues with content? So that's a great question. The way we've trained this large language model is with those things in mind, with compliance, things around DEI and other regulatory things, things you can and can't say, in recruitment and HR. So you can be confident there. We do really recommend still, like, this is to assist you in writing content and copy. And so you'll still want to review this content and copy, before you hit publish. Make sure, things are up to your standards. Again, it's really, really good. But again, our goal for this is not to replace you as a recruiter or, your role in talent acquisition, but really to assist you to make you a lot more efficient. And that is all the questions, I believe. So we are going to wrap this up. Really appreciate everybody who spending this afternoon with me anyway on the East Coast here in the US. Really enjoyed just going through some of this. It's really exciting to see a lot of the advancements in HR and talent acquisition tech right now. Again, I was at HR Tech 2 weeks ago, and just to see a lot of the advancements is really exciting to see what's going on and to be a part of that. So thanks again for spending this time here with me today. Hope you, again, find our tools super useful. Feel free to go sign up for a free account right now. And we would really appreciate your feedback during this period as well. Like, while this product's in beta, we've had some huge support from our early users, which has brought the tool to where it is today. So any type of feedback you could give us, sharing it with other friends or colleagues in talent acquisition would mean a whole lot to us as well. But until next time, signing off here. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a great afternoon.